Cool. Okay, let's see. Well, yeah. So I don't have anything too fancy this time. I just had GPT make me a HTML, CSS, JavaScript file to run off because he couldn't do a PowerPoint today because Sam said I was getting an agent, but he didn't give it to me yet. So we'll see. But today we are coincidentally talking about agents. We are going to talk about code generation agents, and we are going to kind of talk about the latest, hottest, newest thing in that kind of general area, which is the sort of like autonomous coding agents. These are things like Claude Code. Everybody's heard of that one. We got Gemini CLI. We have Codex from OpenAI. We have Open Code, and then we have, I think, a few more. AMP is one of them that we're going to cover a little bit. But yeah, this is an interesting sort of iteration on the previous form factors of code gen models. I think kind of, if I had to guess, this sort of new form factor kind of got mostly unlocked by the latest Anthropic models. So Sonnet 4 and Opus 4 are generally capable enough to competently be able to use multiple tools, review the tool outputs, do some reasoning, then go make a change somewhere, then come back and run the tests and things like that. Which previously, like 3.7, just wasn't quite up to it. You could kind of make it happen, but yeah, we're kind of at that threshold of models where it's like, okay, like this, you can't quite do long horizon yet, but what you can do is like, a fairly sophisticated multi-step workflow, and it just so happens that the most popular sort of form factor for that is the terminal agent. Tangentially, there is also I think AMP and Cursor are probably worth mentioning in that some IDEs, some of the AI-enabled IDEs are starting to have like background agents is what Cursor calls it, and they're kind of doing the same thing where you can kind of spin off a little helper to like actually go get something done while you're working on a different thing, and that's sort of the basic step forward here. I think that makes them that is one of the ways that makes them interesting. But that's sort of the key capabilities unlocked that I'd say. So let's.
Hey, Warren, quick question.
Yeah.
On Cursor, did it prior? So there's kind of this mode where it's assisting you in the editor, and it'll allow you to make edit changes to your editor, etc. But it's not really running commands and stuff like that. Is that the way Cursor used to be, and now this background is allowing it to do kind of these more Claude Code type capabilities?
Yeah, I think we're actually going to go. I think I have a slide. Yeah, I have a couple slides from now. We're going to kind of go through sort of the evolution of how these things got to what they are. So yes, that is correct in that there was a while where Cursor was very much more like hands-on, and the step forward here is like you can get a little hands-off with the background agents, and that's sort of their equivalent.
Okay.
So what are the terminal coding agents? They are CLI tools powered by large language models. I think the differentiator. I don't know if have any of you guys. Any of you guys have a like a terminal LLM or anything like that, like AI Chat or LLM? No brew installs of any of that. Okay.
Not for me, man. I'm in the dark ages.
Right. Well, yeah, no, I can't live without an LLM in my terminal these days. But I think the kind of different or the interesting thing here, in that if you have an LLM-based application and it's in your terminal, you have kind of Unix workflows available to you. You can pipe things in and out of, and then get like an LLM generation in the middle there, and start doing some kind of cool stuff. These guys are somewhat different, I think, to those, let's call them less agentic CLI tools, in that you can still do the sort of same Unix piping composability, but they will actually go, like it'll kick off a full agent to go do some like investigative work and maybe write some code and maybe call a couple more tools and evaluate those, et cetera, and then it'll get back into its Unix pipe, which is kind of an interesting tool to have at one's disposal. we will, I think I have a slide a little later on that goes more into like advanced workflows and sort of basic prompts of how to do that. But I was in one of the interviews from the team who's working on Claude Code. They said that that prospect is particularly interesting to them. So I expect to see some more composability like that in the future. And I think it's quite a cool thing. But end of the day, CLI tools, LLMs, they can generate, modify, and debug code by a natural language. The big difference here is they will call multiple tools. They will reason about the response of the tools. They will call multiple. They will decide a different set of tools, then call those, then get something done, then call a test runner, and so like they'll go ahead and fire off a full workflow for you of some kind, which is their difference. Yeah. So direct access to shell tools. Basically, the core of it is. Primarily like tools for interacting in the terminal, like CD and bash and ripgrep and stuff like that. And just like a tool calling model that's fairly competent, and then some extra reasoning on top. And they do have some interesting divergences in architecture, but I don't think we'll go that deep today. But yeah, these are, like I mentioned, the sort of the big guys on the block right now are like Claude Code, Codex, Gemini CLI, Open Code, and AMP are kind of the ones we're going to go over today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Warren, there was I don't know if you saw in the chat, there was a question there from Mike.
Yeah, let me see if I can get that running up here. Where did it go?
Well, his question was, where does Copilot fit in here?
There we go. Yes, yeah. So we will get to that in like 1 to 2 slides. I would say Copilot is not quite as independent as these guys. I kind of put the most recent iteration of Copilot, which is like Copilot Chat plus tools. I put that like maybe one step behind these guys, because these guys can kind of sort of spin off independently, whereas Copilot Chat, you really need to do a lot of steering still. So why is this important? Now that the models are like competent enough to actually write like half decent code and get all the way through like the similar workflow that you might assign to like a junior developer or something like that, you being a software developer having like basically infinity kind of dumb junior developers that can actually like follow through a whole plan is a different it allows some very like kind of changes in the way that you look at approaching solving problems, or at least it has for me. Obviously the speed is helpful. It can generate a lot of tokens, so you can get more velocity in your PR merges. You can have Claude Code running your CI/CD. You can have him reviewing your PRs. You can ship him an issue and he'll try to PR into it. And for some of these, for some of the more like tangentially related quote unquote vibe coding tools, if you've heard of like Lovable or Bolt or Replit, those are fairly like a little bit more on rails, but the same basic principle of like there's a model, it's going to call several tools, it's going to reason about those tools, then it's going to go, you know, kind of take steps forward based on what's going on there. So you can use this to like rapidly ship an MVP while you're still in the meeting discussing what the MVP is, for instance, as a sort of new thing you can do. However, there are still problems. Are we going to do, I think I have a slide that goes a little bit more into problem. I do it, but it's like much later. But we'll just touch on them here. It's like, because you kind of have to refactor your workflow, you run into a different set of challenges where like some days, or like some of the common ones are like some days this model is like amazing and incredible and I can't believe it, and other days I just want to throw it in the garbage because it can't do anything. And you kind of have to like figure out why that is and how to mitigate it. You can get, so it's very, especially if you're not really dedicated to like sticking into it, it can definitely be kind of similar to a lot of AI tools where it's like, you know, you use it a couple of times, it doesn't really work, and you're like, okay, AI is a joke or whatever. This is, you know, the quintessential trust gap. I imagine as models improve, that will sort of resolve over time. But now that I have agents primarily generating the code, There are other things that I need to worry about, such as like, is my spec clear, and are my stakeholders actually aligned with that spec? And then is that spec getting effectively translated down into like to-dos, code, tickets, issues, etc.? Because the code's just going to start popping up, so I need to make sure everything else is in order, because otherwise the wrong code's going to pop up. That's kind of the idea. Also, long context is very helpful here. If it needs to do a lot of searching through a repo. I know Claude Code specifically does a lot of like async calls out to Haiku to just grab little bits of context and pull them in. Yeah, I would say that's like another capability that we kind of needed to get here. So yes, this is the evolution slide. So I sort of have categorized them into like 5 different categories. The first one, I would say, like it's pretty much just autocomplete. You got Codex, you got Copilot, you got like GPT-3. You're like, you get some completions and that's it. And then you maybe go to ChatGPT, copy paste some code, and go from there. Then, as that started to kind of work a little bit better, those things started getting integrated directly into the IDE. So you would see like kind of, this is around the time when Cursor comes out, and you can just like chat to the model over in the side. It's built into your editor. Maybe you have a couple of extensions or something. Maybe it's got like some awareness of your code base, doing a little indexing, and generally is like a reactive assistant. So like if you ask it for help, then it can help you with one thing, is kind of Gen 2 to me. Then we get into kind of Gen 3, which is the, okay, sure, I can ask the model questions, but now we're also going to let the model call its own tools so that it can sort of come up with and answer its own questions about what it has to do. And this is when you kind of get the release of like Cursor Agent, or Windsurf has Cascade, or like Copilot. They didn't really change the name. It's like Copilot Chat plus tools is kind of their what they've got going on there. Yeah, so these are kind of these are the yes, it can autocomplete. We around this time get like some more sophisticated autocomplete with like Cursor Tab, and I think Windsurf also has one, I forget what it's called, but where it'll try to predict where your cursor is going to go next, and like you can just tab your way through multiple files. And we start getting pretty agentic at this point, is how I would term it. In that now, instead of just asking the assistant to do one thing and it telling me what to do and I go do it, well, now it's got a little more agency. It can go like do a couple of things if I tell it to do that, but it's still very much at this point like fresh off the block, doesn't really work all the time. You really have to like sit down and make sure you're steering the one thing at a time. Like the models just aren't quite there, and you've got to review a lot of garbage code that comes in. And then Gen 4 is kind of, I would say, where we are at, and we're kind of pushing over to Gen 5. Gen 4 is like, okay, the models are good enough to do these like sophisticated multi-step workflows that will involve like researching through the code base, like looking for symbols, grepping parts of the code, reading some of the documentation, creating further documentation to help it, and then doing things like running tests or reading LSP output, and they will kind of like drive themselves, is sort of the terminal agent unlock. And then I would, my speculation, I suppose, at this point is Gen 5 is like, okay, how can we get these guys reliable enough to where we aren't constantly looking over their shoulder, because they still are kind of dumb, and you still do kind of need to review a lot of incoming code. But the idea is, and especially at least Claude Code, and I know AMP, and obviously Cursor has the background agents too, but now most of these agents have the ability to spawn sub-agents. So this agent can make more agents to go do stuff for it. And I think that will involve some more tooling, and we'll go over a few tools that are sort of like already popping up to help you manage multiple terminal agents in concert. And I see a hand up, and then I see a question from Kevin. for Kevin, I would say it's not. The language does not matter. It works for works for any language that you can use a language model for. And then yeah, Roger, you got something? Or R, whoever you are.
Hey, so Gen 3 versus Gen 4. In my mind, I'm thinking Gen 3, even the cursor agent, wouldn't that somewhat be still terminal based, like the commands you would give the agent, or how is it distinct, Gen 3, Gen 4?
Well, cursor agent can't, like, are you saying that like it can use the same types of, like, it'll grep things, and I do that in my terminal, so that's kind of an equivalent thing? Is that what you're sort of getting at, or?
I think I was just trying to kind of understand the what the agentic IDE tool would be. I think in my mind, I would still think that would be closer to like a terminal based tool, or is it like is one GUI and is one terminal? I guess what makes it not terminal? I guess
that would be
Gen
the big
3.
difference, is that like the cursor agent, it runs in a side pane on cursor. It doesn't run in your terminal. It can run terminal commands, but where it lives is this like GUI section on the side of your IDE. So it's sort of like something of a distinction. I think the sort of line that I draw there is cursor agent, or like Gen 3 cursor agent, when it is like I have to watch it. I have to watch it do it the whole time. I'm not gonna go do something else and let it go do its thing, because I don't trust it yet. Is kind of where Gen 3 is at for me. But Gen 4 is like, okay, like I know you're kind of dumb and I might get some garbage coming in, but since I have enough like tests and structure around this task that needs to get done, I'm just going to let you loose on it, and then I'm going to come back and check when you're done. And that's kind of the differentiator. So like I'll give them a directive, and then I'll tab away and I'll go work on something else. Is kind of the difference for me. Of course, this is all just like the opinion and sort of like how I categorize them in my brain. So it's not like a
Got it.
right answer.
Thanks.
And yeah, we got Andrew's iPhone. What's up, Andrew's iPhone?
Yes. I have a question. We've had done some tests with Lovable.dev, and our experience with it has been that it does do a lot of good code, but the two issues we're running into is, one, it still generates code that doesn't work, and two, sometimes it doesn't reuse architecture that's already in place. So I'm curious on your thought on Gen 4. Whether or not it's better at reusing existing architecture. This is assuming code base has grown beyond just the initial prototype. And then secondly, are there ways to integrate like automated testing into, say, Gen 4, where you can automatically give it feedback? So you kind of does the code and testing by itself. Thanks.
Yep. Exactly, yeah. So the specific tool you mentioned there, Lovable, is kind of a like prompt to app utility, which if I do okay, and then I go like lovable.dev, and so this is what I mentioned for like rapid prototyping. There's a few different iterations of these. One of the things that, so we can say make me a Next.js landing page, and I don't know, have a Postgres with RLS for user logins. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, it's gonna make me do all the login stuff, and I don't want to go through all my crap. But it would try to make that essentially. And kind of the cheat code for it is they'll generally make like Next.js web apps, and they'll kind of rely heavily on these sort of like UI rails, and then they'll go for building the UI first, and then once that looks good, they'll try to wire up the back end. Oftentimes they will fail. So the trick with Lovable is two things. I would not use tools like Lovable or Bolt. I might use Replit. I do use Replit sometimes. In my opinion, Replit is like the most competent of the sort of like prompt to app things, just because they have so much code to work with already. But I generally use these for greenfielding. I'm not going to try to get this to understand an existing code base and also correctly understand the web framework it's supposed to use, and like be able to wire everything up accurately. So if I just want like a new landing page, like if I just want to riff on something and spit out an app real quick, I'll go to Lovable or Bolt, or usually all of them, and I'll just be like, give me a version of the landing page, and I'll just take that, and usually I'll end up throwing it in the garbage. But they're very effective tools for rapid prototyping. I noticed especially with Bolt that it is very bad at like even getting it right the first time. Replit always gets it right the first time because Replit has a Replit will use Puppeteer and it will verify, and it'll take a screenshot. It'll verify that the web page is actually up before it hands it off to you, which I know Bolt does not do. I'm not sure if Lovable does that yet, but that is one of the things that you kind of need to do with these sort of like solo prompt to app, like throw the agents at it and something else pops out. Which leads into your other question of like, can it do things like run tests or check if the dev server is up or like check and see if the web page is rendering? Answer is yes. Not all of them have that implemented, but it's very implementable. It's certainly something that Claude Code will do. It's something that Cursor Agent will do. Replit will also do it. It just sort of depends on the product that you're using, but generally speaking, that's where that's sort of the Gen 4 divide is like it can and will like realize it has run into a problem, see like linter errors, attempt to correct them, run the test to see if they pass. If they fail, then it'll make a new to-do list and keep trying to fix them until they pass. Oftentimes, this is not something you want to let it do because. We all have we've all rewritten the test to make it pass before, and Claude loves doing that too. So kind of something to watch out for. But also a very like important pillar of, I think, like this sort of evolving workflow. I've always been sort of an agent-driven developer, and as such, I've always been a test-driven developer. But I don't write. I would hate to be doing TDD if I was writing it like one word at a time with my fingers. But since I can just tell an agent to go make the test and make sure the tests pass, and I can review the tests and I can go back and match that to the BRD, it's a lot more tolerable, and it makes the agents suck a lot less because the big thing they need is constraints in order to work properly, because they will go off the rails very easily. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're heading with Gen 5 is like, okay, if we can keep them on the rails the whole time, then really what we need is to make sure that like this spec of the product that we've actually outlined is actually the product that we actually want, and it's actually spec'd out the way that we want it, and that's not going to cause problems. It's kind of the next step.
I got a question. So have you standardized workflows where you say like, okay, I trust this, I know what it's going to do, and it's going to take about 20 minutes, or I'm going to let this go for an hour, and then you set it up correctly and you have a high degree of confidence? Are you at that level?
I think it very much depends on the workflow. There are a few sort of interesting that I think I might even have a slide on here, but there are a couple of like sort of tips and tricks that you pick up if you are like, for instance, one of the places that I've learned a lot of things is like watching content that is from people who work on the Claude Code team or from Anthropic. One of the things that they try to do that sort of tracks with my current experience is they will try to give the model as much setup as they possibly can, and then they will try to let it run as long as they possibly can before they have to stop it. The thing that this does is it makes sure that your constraints are good, because if they're bad, this isn't going to work at all. Having good constraints is very, very important if you're using these things. And then secondarily, when they're training the models have a think block, and they RL on that, and then the models have the output. And if you interrupt them, then what they like, that's not part of their training. Their training is generally like a back and forth, and then also like the tool use. So if you might notice, or if you start using, or if you have been using Claude Code, that if you interrupt them a couple of times, they'll start interrupting themselves because they think that is how the context window is supposed to work. It's supposed to have these interruptions in it. So what you want to do is never ever put those in there so that it doesn't get confused and start thinking that that's how it's supposed to work. There's a lot of like little kind of optimizations and adjustments you can make to a given workflow that you're using. I haven't really found the like quote unquote golden path. There are I generally will use like a heavily like spec focused and constraint focused workflow, and then I will just like let the agent rip essentially. And if I get something workable that I can like clean up, then I'll take it. But if I don't, or like if it looks like it's a mess, I just throw it away and tell it to do it again. So one of the sort of like evolutions in my workflow is that like I don't care about like rewriting the entire section of the application anymore because I have the constraints, so I can just get 4 versions. It doesn't, it's no sweat off my back. Just a couple more tokens from Claude.
Has anybody gotten to like reproducibility, at least like a triplicate, where they say they get a similar type of answer every time you do it, even though it's going to be different?
I'm not sure I follow.
Oh, same task. You run it 3 times, but separately.
Oh, like, is there, or yeah, any anecdotes of like, hey, my constraints are good enough where no matter how many times I run this, I always get basically the same output? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would, that happens sometimes. I think it really depends on like what project you are doing and how sophisticated it is and what kind of, especially there's an interesting thing that's been on my mind lately, especially like the style of coding you use, like in, something I want to explore more is functional programming and property testing, because what that will result in is because my LLM is only generating pure functions and it is always regenerating new pieces of data and never trying to like transform them and not make new ones, you get a much more like spread out, or you get a much more step-by-step configuration. So it's very easy to tell when something goes wrong because they will have not been doing functional programming in a given function or method or whatever. And the other thing is property testing, where kind of the reason sometimes we rewrite tests is because like our test is wrong. So if our test is like when X, I should see Y. This is a constraint for one path, and ideally it's the happy path, but if you take a sort of property testing approach, which like if anybody's not familiar, like basic principle is describe a couple of behaviors and then we're going to throw a bunch of random input at this test, and you should always hit this behavior. So you kind of, rather than giving it one path and hoping it stays there, it's all of these paths are wrong, go forward, which is I think or like something I want to explore more. Yeah, there's a lot to sort of like think about in terms of refactoring your workflow these days. Yeah, Andrew, what's up?
Andrew?
Yeah, I see a hand. I don't know. You might be looking for the button.
Seems to be. I'll put it down for him. He's not responding.
Sure. Yeah. Nah, if it comes to mind, Andrew, feel free to chime in. Okay, so let's see. So yeah, TLDR, I think, Kevin, what you're going for is like, that's ideal essentially, or like how I work these days is primarily like, I want my spec and my test suite and all of my docs and rules and / commands and stuff like that. I want to get it as close to, I can just regenerate this whole code base whenever I want as I possibly can. Obviously, this is like not a thing you can actually achieve, but the closer you can get to that, I think the more room you have to work with these things, essentially. We might go over it later. I have a friend who has a very interesting workflow that he refers to as the Ralph Wiggum workflow, in which he just sort of lets the thing drive and then prunes it later. And then whenever an agent gets killed, he says like, okay, write some more rules for yourself. Take your learnings and go review your Claude MD or your cursor rules or whatever. And it has this sort of iterative looping workflow where the software just starts like growing, and for better or worse, he has managed to get most of the way through creating a novel programming language with it. So there's something to it. The repo is called Cursed, and it is called Cursed for a reason, because it is absolutely cursed. But it does function. It does compile. Okay, so a couple of, I think this is where we kind of start getting into usage. Two sort of like, we touched on it earlier, where you can either start them up and get the interactive REPL, or, and Notably, at least recently, and I know at least for Claude Code, and I know for AMP, at least for Claude Code, and then I think Open Code also has it implemented. While you're in the REPL is where you can instruct the agent to deploy sub-agents to go do a task that you don't want clogging this agent's context window. I think you can send the directive as the batch command as we have under here with the sort of like piping, and you see like sort of the basic like cat error.log claude-p explain. So like what that's going to do is send like this log file over to Claude with the prompt to explain it, and Claude has all of his usual tools to be able to do that, so I'll probably get a fairly thorough answer back. And then I know, again, at least Claude Code has this, not all of them do, but Claude Code has a GitHub action. Claude Code has an SDK, which is more or less just like an API for the CLI. And Claude Code has also several other things. It has its own hooks in addition to like pre-commit hooks that you can use as part of your CI. And then it also has an extension which integrates with Claude Code, which you can activate using the /IDE command. Maybe I'll get a cheat sheet together of like stuff to know. Because there is a lot of stuff to know when you're using these guys. But yeah, so you sort of have these basic kind of like interactive. We can do like CI or scripting, or we can do like batch commands and sort of do the sort of Unix piping kind of flows. And they're all like useful for various different things essentially. We have usage, Claude Code, npm IG, Anthropic AI, Claude Code, and the further steps to do it. Go through the quick start of the docs. I will make a side note here that the Anthropic Claude Code docs are something, if you're using Claude Code actively, you should probably review them like every week or like twice a week, because they change so often and they will add like very substantial new features. I am interested in learning more about any more specifics on a best practice workflow. Yeah, I think we're definitely gonna go over some best practices with these guys. I have a couple of slides on that, and then if I don't, we'll do a little yap at the end after. One of the best practices, actually, and you will find this in the docs almost on the first page of the Claude Code docs, is there are two things when you start up Claude Code in a new repo. There are two things you want to do. One, you want to type /init. What that will do is create a file in the root of the folder called claude.md. Claude.md is sort of like a combination memory and local rules file. And what the init command will do is tell Claude to examine the repo. So it'll start exploring files, looking through, like data structures and types and whatever interfaces you have that it can do this sort of reconnaissance with. And even if you don't need to know the answers to these questions, I would recommend asking questions to Claude that you think Claude will need to know the answer to, because he will, when you're doing this Q&A, if there is anything that you have in we always use, I know one I ran into earlier was like never use bun run test, always use Eliza OS test, was something we were doing over in the Eliza Discord the other day. We all knew that, but Claude needs to know that. So if it is doing this sort of like exploration, the kinds of questions you might want to ask are like, okay, what testing frameworks do we use for this repo? Like, what is the mono repo structure like? And then any of those, you can either use a hashtag or you can just tell Claude to update Claude MD accordingly. So the sort of first steps are get Claude to explore the code base and create his little memory file, and then look at his memory file and make sure he's not making stuff up, because often he will. Share is clipped on the left for me. Can you narrow my browser window? Let's see. How about that? Will that work? Maybe not. I have like Yabai doing weird stuff here. Maybe that'll work. If it's not, feel free to let me know. I can play with it more. Yep. All right. Cool. Yes. So this is one of the best practices. I would especially, yeah, if you want to get into using terminal agents and Claude code, read the docs. Like everybody's like, you should read the docs, but nobody wants to read the docs. Read the docs. They're so high value for these things. It's wild. And they can't even fit everything that you should know into the docs, but eventually they will. We will take another little detour here. Has anybody heard the term popping up lately, context engineering? That's the latest buzzword. Exactly how one defines this is kind of a bit up in the air, but it's more or less the concept of like, hey, we're not just going to engineer the prompt. What we need to actually be, the thing that we're doing, the thing that we are engineering is not just a prompt, but it is for every one of these agents, whatever task they're doing, they are going to have like a totality of their context window, and if there's anything in there that's wrong, you could screw up the whole further output. This is something a couple of people have called this like context rot or context poisoning. This is especially when you are letting agents drive by themselves. Anytime you have something that is slightly problematic, it always starts compounding because it will read that over and over and over, and it'll think that that's part of the text it's supposed to generate, and then it'll start including that, and then it'll write that into a rule, and you won't notice it, etc., etc. The general principle of like if you're using agents in general, you need to maintain control over the entire context window whenever you possibly can. Good ways to do this are claude.md files. If you look in the docs, read the whole section about Claude MDs, but the finer points are there are global Claude MDs, which go in your home.claude folder. There are project Claude MDs, which either go in the root or they go into the Claude folder in your project. And then each directory can also have like a Claude-local MD. And those rules or memories will only apply when Claude is working in that directory. So by leveraging these sorts of, or like one of the things with Claude.mds is if the conditions are met, it will always be in the context window. So this is a very good like tool for doing that kind of context and memory engineering. So one of the things that I very much like to do is regardless of whether Claude was or wasn't able to do something, when either he's done with the task or I'm pulling him off the task, I will generally say like, hey, for the directories that you worked in, do we need to add anything to the directory scoped Claude MDs so that the next agent will not run into this problem you were having, where if I'm reviewing sort of the issue that Claude seemed to have, and we kind of work through it a little bit and we debug it. We stick that in the Claude MD so that any agent that's in that folder knows that like, oh yeah, if this callback, if you don't handle it correctly, then like this blows up the other thing, and so don't do that. Sort of location-based thing. Kind of a side note here, there is, I think I have it written down somewhere, there is an environment variable that you should set it's something like context is stored locally and grabbed. Let's see. Let's double check what we've got here. We got a couple questions. Is there a way to figure out what's the merged picture that Claude will have merge of global project directory? Not directly. Like these are just markdown files. So in order to like, you can do you can do everything with them, and all the capabilities they have are markdown files. So if you wanted to merge those things and keep track of them and use like an external markdown reader like Obsidian or something, you could. But end of the day, they're just markdown files. They're just text. I generally will like have the Claude MDs open of where I'm working. Like I'll have them open in a buffer somewhere if I need to go check on them. And I do check on them regularly, actually. Like the kind of, I would say a good chunk of the way that I try to drive these things is using these Claude.md or cursor rules or windsurf rules or whatever rules files, because I want to put on constraints and then I want to let them rip. So if I'm not at what constraints they have on them, I'm not going to be able to do that. Context is stored locally and grabbed by Claude on each turn. I don't know exactly the mechanics of how it is injected. I just know that if you are in a project and the project has a claude.md file in the root, or it has the .claude directory, when you are in that project, that claude.md will always be in context. Same goes true when you are in a directory and there's a Claude local. Same goes with your global, they're just always there. So the between the claude.md files and you can like @ files. I believe you can @ URLs. You can also paste in images if needed.
Warren, what does an @ file do?
So if you are, there are a couple of, when you're in the REPL of the terminal agent, there are a couple of like special characters you can use. If you use hashtag, the number symbol thing, that will tell Claude to add this to memory, add this to claude.md. If you use the @ symbol and then you type the name of a file or a URL, it'll pull that file into context for this turn. And so you can use, I think there's a couple of more, they're not coming to mind right now, but same principle that Cursor uses, where you can, if you go @ and then file or resource or whatever, it'll pull that file specifically into context to chat about it if you need it. And then, yeah, we mentioned it a little bit before, but there are some pretty powerful workflows that involve kind of letting Claude like update its own rules and update its own memory kind of based on either when it does well or when it does poorly. You can sort of, you should, in my opinion, best practices, clear your context window often and loudly. There is a / command called compress that will try to summarize and then squeeze down the context window. I don't use this. I will just update claude.md and I'll start a new Claude. I don't want to have to rely on that summary being correct and picking the right chunk to truncate and all that stuff. I just I want constraints and I want a fresh window, and I'll run it out from there. What are your steps when you're creating?
So Warren, there isn't a like staying in Claude. There isn't a way to just say flush your cache. We want to start over.
I believe there is. I know there's a fork thing, and then I know it also stores sessions. I think you can just do new session, but yeah, I use some external tools to manage multiple Claude instances at once. So I just kill one agent and spin up a new one. But that's just because that's the interface that I'm using. There probably is a way to just like clear. I imagine. Well, yeah. That would be a thing if I were to use Claude and I wanted to know that. I would check the docs, and then I would also check the / commands that are available to me. Just type /, they'll all pop up for you. But yeah, the kind of thing that you want to do is have constraints that are ideally self-improving. So you kind of want to like work with a blank slate as much as you can, and then make sure the stuff that's staying there is stuff you actually want staying there. And you generally want to avoid stuff just like randomly getting pulled in for no reason. Like if it's in the window, it should be doing something. What are my steps?
Well, I was just going to say your guidance about if you run into a problem, if Claude's done something wrong, don't continue on.
Absolutely.
Somehow just refresh, restart.
I will. Yeah. Or I don't know if you guys have used this. If you've ever used the agents where you'll tell it to fix a bug, it'll fix a bug, and that will break something else, and then you'll tell it to go fix that one, and that will break the first one, and it'll just like loop like that over and over. I don't know if you guys have ever been in that situation.
Yep. And it's kind of its style gets worse and worse as you go down.
So never ever tell it to fix anything. Just just like throw it away and do the whole thing over again. Like give me 3 versions and I'll ensemble them. Yeah. Generally speaking, like as engineers, we want to walk through and we want to debug and we want to go slow. But if the agent is my engineer, well, I just need to make sure that like this dumb little guy has the proper constraints and like he writes really fast. So that's what I'm going to leverage him for. Give me 10 versions of this, and then I'll check my constraints against it, and see if it should be coming out correctly. And that sort of, I guess, rolls into like what are my steps when curating the context. I have a I use like well, I have a slide towards the end about it, but I have several like external utilities that I use. I make very heavy use of the Claude locals. I will frequently just kill agents. Like I am ruthless to these little guys. And then yeah, I will generally I will keep a close eye on what's going into these Claude MD files, and then like if something is wrong in there, then I have problems. I have to go fix that. Let's see. Yeah, so here's another workflow. You will also find this in the docs. There is also a slash command now in Claude that is /plan. And what this will do is say, put down your tools. We will just chat for a while. And usually the reason I'll be doing this is because what I want to do is get, I want to get a spec nailed down. I want to get Claude MD that corresponds to the spec. I want to get to-dos together that will track with the spec that I'm creating with Claude. And then because I do the sort of TDD oriented workflow, I will start generating tests based on those specs. And if everything up until generate the test is correct, then the test should be coming out looking like the thing that I want. And if the tests look really weird, then I usually will go back and like review and make sure that like all my constraints and product requirements and all that are correct. But the like plan, then code, then verify is a very good thing. You want to give it as much opportunity to verify its work. So there's cursor will just pipe the linter stuff in. Claude code, I believe, with the /IDE integration, it can see the LSP of your IDE, and then I think there's another way to give it that stuff, but I don't recall exactly what it is. But the search edit test fix is kind of a sort of the inner loop. So we chat for a while, we plan it out, make sure we have a good plan, then we save the good parts of that because we don't want all of us like chit-chatting about it in there. We just want just the plan that is written to spec and has all the proper constraints in it and nothing else because I don't want to clog my context. Then other people have it code. I have it. I personally do a little bit more. I have a more granular workflow that I like to put them through, which is spec, then tests, then function and variable names only, then JS doc comments only, and then source code at the very end. And then if your tests are green, then you can make red tests again. The reason I do this is because I want to give Claude the opportunity to look at his own work multiple times. Because there is a reasoning model in the sort of ensemble that makes up Claude code, multiple opportunities to reason over the same thing with fresh context is a great way to like pick up extra bugs or things you missed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I use that workflow. But this one will also kind of do that in that you'll do a very small scoped kind of like do your workflow until the test pass, and then like keep it very small scope, like keep your diff small. Like he's a junior and he doesn't really know what he's doing. He's kind of drunk sometimes. Shows up to work anyways. But there's 500 of him and he's cheap, so we'll take him.
Do you have a slide on that? You list the steps that you follow. Do you have a slide on that, or could you go through that again?
I do not have a slide on that.
Okay.
I have I got it mostly from an article. I'll try to find it. That was about.
Okay. You can post it on Slack afterwards or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So my plan boils down to source code is the very last thing because I can always regenerate source code. The thing that I want to do because I can infinitely regenerate the source code is I want Claude to look at everything that is going to result in him generating source code several times and always reason about it. So the way I do that is we do spec, we do to-dos, we do tests. You can do that kind of in any order that makes sense. Then you do names only of variables, functions, methods, etc. Then you do like JS.comments only. So now first we're going to name it, then we are going to describe its behavior, and only then will we try to generate the code that's going to make these tests pass, and then we'll repeat the loop essentially.
Gotcha.
Yeah, let's see.
So how does that actually work? I mean, are you actually putting your plan out and saying, do you have any questions? Or, I mean, what's the dialogue look like with that?
Well, for me, I generally will put that workflow. It sort of depends on what interface I'm using. I will generally use like a Claude MD file to outline that workflow and say like, this is what we need to do. And then all my all of my Claude MDs will be supporting that kind of workflow, and in that like the things that they describe will generally be coming out in that order. So that sort of implicit pattern gets repeated over and over. I also will use I use a MCP server called Taskmaster to manage to-dos. It's a little bit messy, but you can add some extra. You can add sort of like pre-configured protocols in the way that your to-dos get generated. So there's like external tools that you can use for whatever workflow works for you. Yeah. So let's see. We have.
And how detailed are your specs? Like, do you have it to the point where you have probably a generally preferred architecture? Because one of the problems we've run into is we kind of know how the system may evolve down the road. So we have a certain architecture in mind, but the AI would choose a different architecture, but then we end up like writing so much detail into the spec. It's just long.
Well, yeah, I in my opinion, like spec is the new code essentially. Like if my spec is wrong, the code I'm generating is going to come out wrong too. So the spec shouldn't be overly verbose, ideally. It should be kind of like to the point. It should sort of like describe the stack, describe all of the stuff that you're going to need for the product. So my workflow, because I use Taskmaster, is I will use the spec to generate today's PRD, and the PRD will get decomposed into a list of tasks. So I will, from the spec, I will have a PRD for like a given feature or whatever, and then that will decompose into a series of tasks. And then I can either compress those tasks if they're too granular, or I can expand them if they aren't granular enough with that MCP server. But yeah, they're interestingly, the most recent VS Code fork from Amazon is a spec first workflow. So they have like right in the middle of the screen, they have a big button that says like chat, and they're like, oh, you can code here, and then they have spec, and then they have 4 windows on the side that's like all different little parts of your spec. So they're very and I think this is kind of the paradigm these days, is like the new the new thing that you really need to get right is not necessarily your code, but the whatever source of truth you're using to constrain your code. That's the thing that has to be correct, and your whole team has to be like using the same one essentially. So if like 2 people are using 2 different specs and generating 2 different types of features and then letting their agents run off, so you want to, I would say like specs are probably one of the most important artifacts these days when I'm generating code. Yeah.
Do you have a spec that you could share?
Yeah, let me see
what does that look like?
Yeah, I actually have a whole article on the topic somewhere. Let me see if I can find. I may go to DI here, and then let's do. Let me see if I probably should have grabbed one, but there is a. I got the term essentially from ghuntley.com/spec. Isn't it? Or is it specs? I don't know. Where is it? I'll find it. But let me think. There's one that I'm thinking of, I think, where I have, yeah, I'll just drop this into the, that there, and then let's see if there's one of Jeff's specs here, and then I'll see if I can find one of mine. Let's see. Let's see. Generally speaking, like that. So let's see. See if I can just like screenshot this and pipe it over there and there. Maybe. Am I gonna be able to? Okay, I'm just gonna drop the screenshot there in chat. Yeah, I can go see if I can fish one out. I think I have one for one of my games, maybe. Let's see. But yeah, generally speaking, for me, largely because my workflow so far still is Taskmaster centric, it is a long conversation that's going to generate multiple markdown documents that are going to describe sort of like different parts of the architecture. And then I'm going to try to do my best with like the naming and file structure to sort of support that separation. So I'll have like backend.md and frontend.md, and then I will have like /backend/frontend to kind of reinforce the idea that like this is what you're going to do for backend and this is what you're going to do for front end. And then when they're in those folders, I'll have a Claude MD sitting right there as well. There is the other tool, other than Amazon's most recent IDE, which is called Kilo, there's another tool called Bear Claude, which is essentially just like a markdown, sophisticated markdown editor with Claude wired up to it. Let me see if that's, it's got to update. But yeah, in the meantime, we have a couple of tangential to best practices, I guess. You can. So there is there's a flag that you can start Claude Code with called dangerously accept permissions. I would generally say set the environment variable that locks it to the current working directory, and then always use the dangerously accept permissions thing, because if you don't, it'll just like nonstop ask you if the thing that it can do, that it's going to do next, is okay, which sometimes you want if it's a very like critical piece of the infrastructure and you don't want it to get screwed up. But in my opinion, the effective way to do that is not to manually one by one approve the usage of a given tool. Like I might use permissions JSON to give some conditions under which like certain commands, sometimes file deletion, but I kind of rely mostly on like git, Claude hooks, and then like git commit hooks essentially. So generally speaking, the thing that I'm trying to do is have good constraints that are sort of self-improving. And then I'm also trying to do sort of like an atomic commits strategy. I use Git Butler for some of this, where I want to always be able to like roll back and like step back a few times if something got really, really out of whack. And then I also want to make sure that anything that's getting all the way to PR should have gone through a few reviews either by me or by Claude at some point.
So, Warren, a question on that. Have you ever had Claude like start making changes outside of the project directory?
Yes, that's so I just learned about the I don't think outside the project directory. I think
I had it one time. It was in a loop trying to solve a compatibility issue, and it decided the way to do it was to go edit the Python source code in the conda directory.
Well, yeah. So
so like some package wasn't compatible, so it was going to go change the package.
So that that specifically is a thing that you want to address with an environment variable that I did not know that you could set until like 2 days ago when I saw it on Twitter. I don't even know if it's in the docs, but there is, and I'll see if I can. Let's see. Do I have it? I should have it in some. Let's see. What is the keyword that I'm looking for? We want directory. Oh shoot, I don't have it. Yeah, I'll grab the environment variable later, but there's an environment variable that you can set where it won't change its working directory until you go change it for it. And I generally will, especially if I have dangerously accept permissions on it, I'm just gonna I'm gonna sandbox it in a like subdirectory and say like you can only play here and you can't leave. Sorry.
And is that sandbox? Is that enforced by some deterministic software out around surrounding the LLM,
mm-hmm.
or is it enforced by the LLM?
Or I would presume so. So Claude code is, there's an LLM in there, but there's a lot of extra code on the side.
Yeah.
So if you set that environment variable, I'm presuming that there's deterministic code that says you cannot leave this directory anymore.
Okay.
But
yeah, I'd like to find that one.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely find that because that's actually it's huge. I'm sort of upset that I didn't know about it earlier, but yeah, it's because the thing or like interest. I guess a fun fact, like kind of, or one of I think the contributing factors to why it does that is because most of these terminal agents navigate via ripgrep. So if it ripgreps for something that it thinks is going to be there but can't find it because it used the wrong word, then it's going to think the directory doesn't exist, and it's going to go like looking to go find where it's supposed to be, or like it's just going to mess up its whole flow. That's sort of also related to another problem where if it's like running the dev server command, but the dev server is already running and it only gets the error back, then it's going to think the dev server is broken when in fact it was just that the dev server was already running and it didn't need to try and start it back up. Or it didn't start up fast enough. Those sorts of cases are ones you can look for to like address in the postmortem claude.md update. So if you see that like it tried to run the dev server was already running, and it went completely off the rails because it started doing weird stuff because it thought it needed to fix the dev server. You can just update to claude.md like when you run npm run test, the feedback that you get, or like I am running the dev server for you, so don't worry about it kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Is sometimes how to address that.
Yeah, I have a question about when I use Cloud, does it have to, the folder that it works in, does it have to be at the root of the repository, or can it be in one of the subfolders? So for example, if I have a front end and back end, and I only wanted to work on the front end and not touch the back end, is that possible?
Yeah, so I believe you can use that environment variable of like don't change the working directory. So if you just start Claude with that environment variable in that working directory, it won't leave. I might just Google that. Maybe Dia knows actually. Dia, what is the envar I can set for Claude that locks the working directory? Hopefully she can find it. I don't think that is the right one. I'll have to actually go find it.
I can look it up. I appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully it's in the docs by now. I'm not. It certainly. Or I'm gonna assume that either it wasn't or I missed it for a while because I like I said I try to reread them like at least once a week because there's usually new stuff in there.
I also have another question. At least for us, typically we like to use stateless functions, like Azure Function in particular, for our back end, and then other things for front end. And is Cloud able to like bring up both environments and test it? Because I noticed most of the stuff out there it uses Node.js.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Is Cloud able to do what now?
Where if you have a web front end, but the back end is not Node.js, but it's actually C#, for example. Azure Function is what we use.
Okay.
And so, will Cloud be able to edit both and then bring both up and test it?
Essentially, if you can do it in a terminal, so can Claude. You might need to like add a like instructions to the Claude MD, or you might need to probably there probably is like some auth stuff for Azure, but I think if you start if you are logged in when you start the Claude process, if like you're logged in that terminal, I think you should be okay with auth for Azure. I don't quote me on that. I'm not 100%, but
Got it.
But you should be able to, yes. Like as long as you instruct him to use a given tool, if it's a thing that you can run in your terminal, you should be able to do it.
Got it. Thank you.
Let's see. So yeah, safety control versioning. Yeah, you can use permissions. I usually don't. I always run them in dangerously accept, and I will try to. I found the envar. It is Claude bash maintain project working dir equals 1. If you set that, he will stay in the working directory where you started him.
That doesn't guarantee though that the tools it launches are only going to access the working directory. Is that right?
I'm not 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, that would probably need some testing, but I would presume. So like, well, yeah, what's like the alternative, right? It's like if this is not set, he can use tools anywhere. So if it is set, presumably he shouldn't be able to use tools anywhere. That would be why I would turn that on, right? But yeah, definitely, test and keep an eye on it and see what you get. Interrupt with escape. I try to do this as little as possible, but if you do see it happening, you certainly can. As we mentioned before, like if he gets interrupted, that's how he thinks it's supposed to work now. So he'll start interrupting himself or doing silly stuff like that. So ideally, you just kind of want to let it rip. And like if he's going off the rails, generally, what I will do is I might interrupt at some point, but I might let him just try to like finish what he's doing and then be like, hey, you did this wrong. Let's update your Claude MD accordingly, and we're gonna kill you and start a new one. Best tools to create good spec files. I would definitely read that G. Huntley article. I honestly, generally, I'll do that sort of step in, just in like ChatGPT or something with like O3 Pro. Generally speaking, what I'm trying to do there is, or ideally. Maybe it's ChatGPT or whatever, but ideally, multiple people who are stakeholders in the project, like probably PM guy, probably product guy, probably engineering lead. All of these people should make sure that they're on the same page in that like spec conversation. So if it's me and I'm describing the ideal situation, I probably have a like conversation with some model that the whole team is like able to see the conversation and is able to like sort of update the PRD. I think actually one of the tools that we're working on, I'm helping a buddy with the startup's Tribe Code, and one of the things that we want to do is like have a good way for creating the spec and then having a good feedback loop between spec and test suite. So there may be some utilities in the near future to help you do that. But yeah, I would start with that article and then kind of, I think it's true for a lot of this. Like, there's a lot of little tricks and weird stuff you can learn, but end of the day, what works in your workflow is the most important thing. So long as you understand that the concept of specs are important, how you implement those, I think, is kind of whatever's working best for you. As I mentioned, my workflow is fairly Taskmaster centric, which is a specific MCP server. And the way that I get Claude to do stuff is I will give him PRDs and he generates task lists. So all my specs are sort of oriented around spitting out the right PRDs for that kind of work, which may not be the kind of workflow that works for you. So I would definitely like look into experimenting with it. There's also a ton of like fun open source tools to try for stuff like that. Yeah, Bear Claude is an interesting one as well. I got that up, but I don't have that too set up. Let's see.
Warren, could you just briefly describe the whole MCP ecosystem? Like how does that work? And
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Let me double check and see if I got a slide coming up on it here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Didn't mean
no
to jump.
worries. We're good. Let's move that over here. And then Bear Claude can close, and we can get off Twitter. Okay, let's see. Where are we at? We're at safety control and versioning.
We're actually, yeah, it's 9 after 9 or 7:45 already, so I don't want to derail you if you're.
Yeah, sorry. What was the thing that you were asking about?
Oh, I was just
MCP,
wondering,
MC.
like, what's the whole MCP?
Yeah. We got
look
that.
like?
Yep, that's coming up. The other thing I do want to touch on here is two things. Well, so interrupt with escape, and if you hit escape twice, you can, the last turn that you and Claude had, it'll clear that. So if he's starting to get off of the rails and you like know that this is going to be a problem and you don't want that in your context anymore, you can just escape, and roll it back. This is often good for, I don't know if you can like stack that. I would hope that you could, because I would definitely use that to get out of a like we're spinning around in circles doing the bug fixy, bug breaky kind of spin out thing. A good way to do that is to just clear it all up and run it back down from the start. Git, I would say, I might argue that maybe full on a more important skill than knowing like the syntax of your programming language you're using is knowing how to use Git. Git is like you especially if you're letting these things kind of like run on their own, you will live and die by how good your Git setup is, because you need to be able to like organize commits and be able to roll back when something goes off the rails. I've looked into utilities like Git Butler and Git Branchless, and I'm still kind of dialing it in. Work trees are also extremely powerful for these guys. With Claude, he can deploy sub-agents in and of himself, but you can also use work trees to have multiple instances of Claude, and each one of those can have their own set of sub-agents to offload context to. And you can kind of divvy up the work if something like if front end is not going to touch back end, we're not wiring it up yet, you can do a work tree and you can have one Claude on front end and one Claude on back end, and you can just kind of let them both rip and see how they go. Yes, Git is very, very important. Learn it well. A great website for that is ohshitgit.com. It's very, I don't know, if you haven't been there, it's fantastic. ohshitgit.com. Highly recommend. Here are some very common, like, here's how I fix this, commit immediately, yep, very good website. Highly recommend. And yeah, I'm expecting to get a little deeper on my Git workflows and try out weird stuff like jujitsu and stuff like that. Sandbox credentials, secure secrets. Yeah, like the auth thing is really kind of like unsolved. Don't have. I think, well, GitHub will even catch you now before you commit any secrets or whatever. But you kind of have to figure out how you're going to do secrets management when it comes to these guys. They will adopt most of the stuff from your terminals. If you're logged into AWS already, you're probably okay. But I've actually been meaning to look more into something like 1Password to just sort of like share all my credentials with my agent, just because I don't want to deal with it, kind of thing. Advanced features. So there is, you can pretty much go as deep or as shallow as you want with these guys. You can just spin up Claude and tell them to go do stuff and see what happens. Or you can do things like start creating your own custom / commands and macros. You'll use the .claude folder for this. Read the section in the docs about the .claude folder. There's a bunch of stuff you can do in there. Highly effective stuff. Most recently, there was the addition of hooks, which is definitely worth reading. Basically, you can set stuff up to like deterministically always fire something off whenever Claude calls a given tool or gets a particular response from a tool, etc., etc. I haven't really thoroughly explored these yet, but I'm expecting them to be very, very powerful. So MCP. I guess quick show of hands. Who knows what an MCP is? Who's like familiar with those, or like maybe has heard the term, or are we? How up to speed are we on MCP? What you got, Mike? Yeah, feel free to just shout it out. Go for it. Heard about it. Okay. Cool. Well, yes. The MCP is the Model Context Protocol. It is a thing from Anthropic that is sort of like an open API spec. In fact, it could probably just be an open API spec, but we won't delve too far into that yet. Basically, you can spin up an MCP server and several LLM-driven applications. So Cursor is one of them. Claude Desktop is one of them. Claude Code is one of them. There are any number of clients that you can have for an MCP server. And what the MCP server will do for each of those clients, presumably there's an agent running in them, what they will do is expose a certain collection of resources to that agent. There will be prompts. So if I have a MCP server that has a particular collection of tools that need very specific system prompt type instructions depending on the tool you use, it will inform the agent that like this will be your system prompt when you are calling this tool. There is resources, which are just they are artifacts, docs, files, images, etc. Like you can package something that for resources, Claude will pull those in, like he will be aware that they are available and will pull those in when needed. If you want to make sure, if you want to be the person that's pushing it to him and to make sure that he has a given artifact, use a prompt and not a resource. That's one of the tricky things, but not to delve too far into Model Context Protocol, but modelcontextprotocol.com, basically, it's sort of, you can kind of think of it as like the sort of USB standard of how to wire things up to agents. So I have like, as I mentioned, I use Taskmaster pretty heavily. I use a server called Context 7, which provides a couple of tools for Claude to be able to call to get documents or documentation of a library that he's working with. I use a memory, or it's memory ref. It's it's one of the ones that's just in the Model Context Protocol repo. Such that all of my Claudes, my Claude Code and my Claude Desktop and my Cursor, they all have the same memory. They can all remember what I'm doing between all of those. But more or less, MCP is just like a spec to be able to give Claude some tools. I would encourage experimenting with MCP, but also being cautious with MCP because every server you add is going to add something to the context window. So if you add too many MCP servers or your MCP server has too many tools, I actually kind of want to refactor Taskmaster because it gives you 34 tools, and there's no way he needs 34 tools for that. But the more stuff that's in your MCP server, the more potential you have to clog your context window. So I would use them like sparingly, tactically. There are a couple of like managers you can use to in fact, you could probably use Claude Code hooks to fire up an MCP server when you get a certain response from a certain tool and sort of manage them that way. But you basically like don't stuff him full of MCPs because it's not gonna work. But yeah, I guess on MCPs, are there any like questions, anything people were wondering about? I know it's kind of like a hot topic, or it was for a little while. Decently familiar at this point.
Yeah, I got a question. So as far as like the whole workflow, and you have like an application, and you have all these other things to do, like I'm publishing right now, I have to use LaTeX and these other things, is like how dependable is this? Is like, so LLMs or like ChatGPT is pretty reproducible these days, and I can get the similar type of answer. And is it at that level today with agentic workflows that you can really rely on it? Because you said that, there's context windows issues alone with the LLM. How do you deal with all the other complexities and thinking like you have a big task on the horizon and you might have issues with agentic workflow?
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, probably not a terribly helpful answer, but like it's as reliable as you make it. If you just sort of like give Claude some tools and maybe a prompt that says go do the thing and like let them loose, you're probably not going to get very deterministic workflows. But if you have like a very like thorough specs, you have a couple of hooks that are going to keep him on track, you have something that's going to flag if he's like throws like the same error 3 times in a row, it means he's probably poking something he shouldn't. These kinds of things, I would say that they need, or like, I think this kind of goes back to like, we're sort of at the transition between Era 4 and Era 5, where agents are reliable enough to let them try to get something done on their own, and if you have everything set up right, they can do it pretty reliably, but there's a lot of qualifiers in a lot of those words and those sentences. So we aren't, I wouldn't say we're at the full-on, like, I'm cool with just like spinning up 10 Claude codes and like having the right tests and spec in place and just like letting them rip and expecting that software to come back like most of the time correctly. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we are driving there fast. And presumably some of this stuff or some of my like external utilities will get built into Claude Code. Maybe we'll have a couple of model updates and we'll kind of get towards a thing where we can do like orchestrated multi-agent sophisticated workflows that are all sort of like working in tandem. I have a couple of friends who are like really pushing the boundary on this and are using things. They're using like an MCP server that Claude can call that is just stop. And he's doing this because he's running multiple of them in parallel, and sometimes one needs to wait for the other to finish, so it'll just call its stop tool and hang out until it sees that it gets this the update that it should continue.
Yeah, and if you have examples of the specs or constraints, that would help too.
Yeah, I will grab. Yeah, that Geomly article is definitely worth reading, and I'll see if I can grab some and drop some off in Slack. Actually, let me make a couple of notes here let's see, grabs, specs, maybe taskmaster. I feel like there was another thing, or yeah, constraints. Constraints in general is just kind of always how I've worked with agents. Like I basically like never expected them to be able to just go do the thing. I always figured it was like, okay, like I have to set you up to be able to do the thing. So like constraints and then context engineering are kind of your main thing. Chroma has a bunch of material on context engineering, and DSPy and secondarily like VX is also worth looking into if that's a topic that interests you. DSPy is sort of oriented entirely around context engineering. They've been doing that for a while. So yeah, you can also there are sessions. There's a concept of sessions to Claude. I think you can fork them. Yeah, you can, because you can persist the session and you can pick it back up later. And I will do that sometimes to kind of do that little fuzz test that you're talking about, Kevin, where it's like, okay, I want 4 versions of this actually. Like, I've got the first half of the conversation. I want like 4 forks of the conversation just to see how it's going to play out, kind of thing. We are coming up on time here, so we have just a little case study of a random thing I found on GitHub. So this was authored by Claude. And you can see that he's got a docs folder and he's got a todos.md that he was updating. So this is, Claude has a built-in todos, but often people will put in their claude.md, like make a todos.md so that everybody can see it and not just your single instance can see it. I don't know if do we have like a Claude MD here? Yeah, we do. So maybe we'll have do we have a todos? Oh, it's going to be on here some. Well, docs PRDs. Do we have? Interesting. Okay, so I would expect to see a .taskmaster folder here, but I don't see it. But we have a couple of PRDs. So this is the spec for this. I'm assuming he's either just sort of like having Claude straight up generate this, or he's using some sort of utility to do it. But as you can see, we have like a feature description here. And we do goals, user stories, functional. So yeah, this looks a lot like Taskmaster to me because this is kind of that format. But yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. The basic principle is like give him a folder that tells him what he's supposed to be doing when he's working on a given thing, and then use or like I'm a big fan of TDD based workflows where you kind of have the plan, so you got your PRD or your spec or whatever. You have the write the code, and then you have the validate the code. So if your testing sort of feedback loop is good, then you should be able to kind of run that in a loop. But as you can see, Claude is, or I'm not sure if he actually does it on this, but there's a GitHub action, and there is like a Claude app that you can install to a given repo on GitHub that will let, I think some of these are just from Claude. I don't know. I kind of lost my place there, but this is, yeah, Sabotic and Claude, because Claude will now attribute himself to this stuff. And then we have the little change there, and then yeah, the kind of the interesting part is the docs update to me at least. Yeah, this was going to be like, hey, let's like do a little demo thing, but I didn't have time to get that set up. Challenges, as we've said a bunch of times, spec ambiguity. If your stakeholders aren't aligned on what the spec should be, then you are not going to get the thing that you want. So everybody needs to be on the same page when it comes to what we are telling Claude. And if that is correct, then we need to make sure he's not filling his own context window with garbage, and that we are telling him the right stuff to get him there. It's also kind of there's like trust gaps, especially if you are not like a AI person or you're not really a Claude code user. It can be you end up like reviewing a lot of garbage code, and it can be really annoying for a lot of more experienced engineers. More experienced engineers, especially because what people are used to is having PRs that come in that are well-engineered code. And this, like, as a consequence of this workflow, you do get plenty of PRs that are not well-engineered code. But the good news is you just kick it back and say, do it again. And it comes back up in 10 minutes and you're good. You don't have to keep reviewing the trash. Multi-agent merge conflicts, again, like this is like the Git thing. You need to, if you're gonna run multiple instances, you gotta figure out a way to manage that. Usually it's work trees, and there's like a few, there's a lot of utilities that leverage like work trees and tmux and stuff. Let me write that down. Multi-agent workflow utilities. And then, yeah, monitoring and logging is very important. I saw somebody the other day that is piping all of their Claude logs into Datadog so that they can analyze trends and figure out where they're getting screwed up over time, and like generate data sets to sort of, hopefully once we get to open source territory, which we're getting pretty close. Kimmy's kind of crushing. Basically, verbose is a very good thing to run. I believe verbose will just show you what is in the full context window at all times. It can kind of be a lot sometimes, but yeah, there's several utilities to do this. The other thing I guess I haven't mentioned yet is that if you're not on the max plan, if you're just running it through API, Claude Code chews tokens. Like he will burn like $1,000 in a week or two if you let him. So keep an eye on that. Max plan is definitely the way to go for now. What are the implications here? Yeah, there's a couple of things that at least are occurring to me where it's like the software developer, software engineer kind of role is like, I don't know, we all knew it was going to shift, and it's sort of starting to take shape here to me where it is, I am more like, I'm doing the thing that was always really the valuable thing, which was taking like stakeholder needs, mapping that into software that meets those needs. And like, that's the important part. That's more important now because you don't have to do the writing the code part. So you need to make sure your spec is good and that you have a good workflow to get that code written for you. But that's what you have to do. You don't have to manually write it anymore. You know, maybe if it's not entirely true now, it should be true by the next like model and a half of generations, in my opinion. We're basically there, in my opinion. It just takes a lot of work right now. Longer horizon tasks and more agents. As I mentioned, like last couple just a week or two ago, Claude got the ability to deploy subagents, and so now if you're running multiple Claudes, they can all have their own little agent swarms, and then as the models get better, they're going to be better at helping you with the things that they need. So one of the tricks with specs, the two articles, I'll link them both. It's specs and standard lib. Is that the initial specs are definitely something your team should work on, but you should Claude can help you make good specs essentially. The code is where we made our money. No, that is not where you made your money, Mike. Always the valuable thing that you did was not write for I in range. That was never the valuable thing you did. The valuable thing you did was map stakeholder needs onto software that solves those needs, and you still need a U for that. You can generate all the code you want, but if you can't do that, that's what I hired software engineers to do, is to get my software working.
Yeah, but the stakeholder can now use this and remove me from the pipeline.
I would say I think by the time the stakeholder can, because like this, like getting this correctly mapped, or like if that stakeholder has not mapped those needs into software before, like that's not what they do. They haven't engineered a software solution to the problem that they were having. Like they have ran a team, which is going to be helpful because you do need to run a team now. They have like spec'd out a product, like that is helpful. But unless they already were software engineers, they were not engineering software solutions to stakeholder problems. So in my opinion, like your role is going to change. But in my opinion, the thing that software engineers did that was valuable was never write code. It was always like have the shape in your head that you can map onto the thing that you actually need to get. It's just a different way to get there these days. And I would like to think that it's going to be a more robust and cool way, because you can kind of, these agents can also help you get these things together that you need, like get everybody on the same page and ask clarifying questions, and you guys just sit in a room and kind of chat about what it is that you need and watch the specs start populating and then like debating with each other to get it all dialed in. And then once it is and everybody's happy with it, then you can take it and you can go break that out into all of these like constraints and protocols and other stuff that you need. I think you're gonna need somebody who can do that part essentially. And I think that part is a good place to start looking in terms of like, okay, what is my job gonna look like in the future? In my opinion, of course.
And they do architecture.
They
Can they determine, okay, I'm going to use a RabbitMQ here and a microservice there and things like that?
Well, they can make those decisions. Are they good at making those decisions? Not yet. Presumably they will at some point be good at making those decisions. But I think I think that is kind of one of those things that you need taste for, right? Like if I've read everything about RabbitMQ and I've read everything about microservices and I can write 100,000 characters a second, well, I might think that RabbitMQ is the right move here, but I haven't actually tried to like use the AWS service that I know we have to use that's gonna like make the queue all weird, or like you kind of have to, there's like learn stuff, and it's like maybe we should not go for RabbitMQ, maybe we should go for like some other solution, or maybe we should use a different architecture here. But they can be valuable pair architectures in that process, I think, in my opinion. They're smart enough to be able to do that now. I think you could, if you tried really hard, get them to do the whole architecture and implementation. I think it would take a lot of wrangling and they would get it wrong a lot. But yeah, I think it's ultimately it should be like an augmentation to that step, because I think that somebody who has been designing architectures like that for quite some time is going to have a sort of like je ne sais quoi that you kind of need to really do that effectively, in my opinion, of course.
You mean they're gonna be my co-pilot?
Well, essentially, yeah, or like that's really what they. That's what like right. Previously, they were like only co-pilots, like they'd sit right next to you, and now they get to sit like one seat further away from you, and you still have to kind of like look at their screen every now and again. But they're starting to be able to kind of go out on their own a little bit. But like you might need to go pull the junior back in and be like, hey, like this is what I'm thinking about architecture. I noticed you were using that. Like, what do you think we should do? What do you want to do? And I think that's valuable input for the model to have, considering it's going to be the one generating code, right? So at least that's where I'm at on it. And yeah, I think
We're getting pretty close. Well, we're past time actually.
yeah, I think
Getting
we
close.
are, yeah.
You want to get in wrap?
Yeah, that's my last one. I would definitely recommend taking a look at all of these. I didn't cover AMP a lot. I think the AMP team is doing very interesting things in this kind of area. So if it's interesting to you, I would definitely recommend like trying out AMP to see if that is something that jives for you. If Claude Code has not been your thing so far. Yeah, I'll drop some links for the extra stuff.
I noticed you haven't talked about vibe coding and cursor and these tools that the uneducated, in my opinion, is using to actually make a lot of money.
I personally take something of an issue with the term vibe coding just because it is because I prefer agent-driven development because you can do vibe coding with that if you want, but not every version of agent-driven development is vibe coding, in my opinion.
Hey, Warren, let me ask you something, a big ask here.
So,
Could we maybe next week look at one of these tools running?
yeah, I could set something up. I've been.
I think that'd be useful. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I had this picture in my head, but I don't
Right.
have
It was very
I have concepts floating around. Maybe.
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
Okay. I know it's a huge ask, man, but I mean, this is
I gotta
essentially
be-
we're talking about what people are going to be doing from here on
Well,
out,
and,
right?
and I have workflows that I still need to, like, I'm still kind of, it's not an exact science by any means right now, and there's definitely like stuff
absolutely.
I need to be playing with and trying out too. So yeah, I'm down to see what I can come up with, and then see if we can do a little sandbox drive. See
Okay,
what happens.
thanks, man. Does anybody disagree with that idea?
Yeah, and if you could use the Kimmy K2 so we get an idea of how good it is.
The trick with, I am absolutely open to that, but it's kind of tricky to make that work, just because Claude Code is not open source. There is a router that I've been meaning to look at, and there's also something coming from the Charm Bracelet team that uses Kimmy natively. But yeah, I'll definitely look into. I'll see. Yeah, maybe we can do like a code off between Open Code with Kimmy and Claude Code with Claude, and see how they do something like that. Could be kind of fun.
Well, what is Kimmy? I've never heard of that before.
That is the latest model from Moonshot AI. It is a 1 trillion parameters, actually, 32B active. But it's state of the art, right? It's top dog in open source right now. And it is beating Sonnet on a few and coming close to Opus on others in terms of benchmark.
Why don't I suggest if we're going to continue same topic next week, then we can kind of just wrap up this week.
Sure, yeah.
And we'll just roll in. Because I'm sure there's a lot of questions we could.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Feel free to drop anything into the Slack and I'll see if I can. I don't know. If I'm finding a direction, maybe I'll drop that off too, and we can kind of feedback loop it and figure out what a cool exercise would be.
Yeah, and if you're new, please join the Slack out there and the West Coast ML Slack. So.
Yeah, I dropped the link and invite link, and we've had quite a few people.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks, Roger, for doing that.
Are there still?
This. Yeah, I think this is really great, Warren. I mean,
I'm glad. Well, yeah, it's. I definitely have. Yeah, or when the vibe coding thing got popular, it kind of bummed me out because if you want to say that whenever you have an agent generate code for you, you're vibe coding, that's the only kind of coding I do. So it was kind of sucked for everybody to just be like, oh yeah, that thing you've been learning how to do, it's like irrelevant garbage and everyone hates it. LOL.
Oh man.
But the hope is that there is a grown-up version of vibe coding, and that's what I've been doing the whole time.
Cool.
Fingers crossed.
At that point, I'm going to stop the recording.
Sounds
and
good.
we can go off record. But thanks, Warren, for this.
Absolutely.
And I think everybody got something out of it. And a very, very interesting topic.
Yeah, no, there are plenty of rabbit holes to fall down.
Okay.
That's why it works so well for me. I'm very good at falling down those.
Okay, I think I stopped it.
Cool.
I don't. Oh, yeah, we've still got